think in contrast to 2012, I think SummerSlam 2013 was a show that a lot of people remember a lot more. I remember my personal levels of interest and excitement for the show were a lot higher than they were in 2012. Some really good matches on this card. And I guess it was sowing the seeds for what was to come in the rest of 2013, which I thought was actually a very good year for the WWE. And the first half, at least, of 2014 as well was a very, very good year. Led many people to believe that maybe some kind of mini resurgence was going to happen with the company, and then a series of things happened, and it didn't really kind of work out that way. But yeah, this was a show that I was actually away for, and I didn't watch it live, so I had to kind of avoid the result as I was kind of on holiday, and I came back and I was looking forward to watching it, and I wasn't disappointed, if I remember rightly. Just running through the card, the pre-show match, you had Rob Van Dam defeating Dean Ambrose for the US Championship. A very odd kind of championship reign for Dean Ambrose. He was one of the longest reigning US champions in recent memory. But the reign itself was largely insignificant. He didn't have that many matches. He didn't really defend it that much because the main point of his character was that he was a part of the Shield at the time. So there wasn't really any need to have many singles matches for the title. But the fact that he held it for so long without really defending it, and then ended up losing it on the pre-show, it's just not an asset of Dean Ambrose's career that people are going to remember. The fact that he was the US champion. So the proper card kicked off with Bray Wyatt versus Kane in a Ring of Fire or Inferno match, however you want to call it. This was Bray Wyatt's debut match. The Wyatt family's debut was much anticipated. They came in, they went straight after Kane, which kind of made sense, I guess, going after one of the big dogs of the company. And I think people were expecting more from this, if I'm honest. This wasn't the sort of the match that it could have been. This could really have opened the show really well, and this could have gone down in memory as a really one of the best debuts of anybody, sort of particularly in recent times. Bray Wyatt gets the win through some help with Luke Harper and Eric Rowan. Little did we know that this was going to be a trend of Bray Wyatt's. I think even today, he doesn't seem to get many wins on his own. He always seems to rely on outside interference, whether it's other members of the Wyatt family or whether it's children in goat masks singing "He's got the whole world in his hands," But at the time, anyway, I remember being quite excited for Bray Wyatt and hoping that a lot of the stuff he was doing on NXT was going to bring to the main roster. So it was a good spot for Wyatt, a good way to introduce again the Inferno Ring of Fire match that we hadn't seen in a while. But a largely forgettable match, a match that could have been a lot more, I guess, which is something that people will probably remember from it. We had Cody Rhodes defeating Damien Sandow for a straight singles match. Actually, this was for. I really like this feud. I remember, obviously these two were a tag team for a while, the Rhodes Scholars, and then they split up at Money in the Bank when it's one of those heel turns where Damien Sandow managed to sort of throw Cody Rhodes off the ladder and win the briefcase at the last minute. I never really got why that was a particularly good reason to turn somebody heel or to turn somebody else face. The point of that match is that it is every man for itself, and you're supposed to get the briefcase. From a kayfabe point of view, I think it's kind of a lazy way to turn somebody face and somebody heel. But the feud was quite good. I remember, Cody throwing the briefcase into the river and Sandow having to go out and get it. They were doing something like a lot of backstage segments with this. Cody Rhodes, I think, is a great speaker and knows how to get the crowd going. So I enjoyed this match. I enjoyed this feud for what it was. The match itself was okay. Didn't get a lot of time, really. I think it was, about 6-7 minutes long. And I think what could really have helped was if they would have had the match for the briefcase, which I was surprised that they didn't go down that road. It looked like they were going to do that. Especially seeing as though Sandow didn't do anything with the briefcase ultimately. He kind of cashed it in and lost to John Cena. But a good feud, and I kind of credit WWE at this time in 2013 with trying a little bit harder than they seem to be trying now. I don't know whether this was because this was before the introduction of the WWE Network. I kind of feel like the effort they've been putting into their pay-per-views has really declined since the introduction of the network. Probably because they're not expecting people to pay as much for the pay-per-views anymore. It's just a $9.99 price. We had a World Heavyweight Championship match, which was really low on the card for quite a big title. Del Rio defeating Christian by submission. I don't remember this match, to be honest. Obviously, these two had more of a prominent feud before in 2011. Then coming into this match 2013, I think people would kind of already seen this before, and it's not really a match that I'd recommend going back and watching, to be honest. Natalia defeated Brie Bella by submission. Again, this was a time when the WWE just weren't really that interested in the Divas division. You could argue that they're sort of trying a bit more with the whole Divas Revolution type thing, but again, I don't remember this match particularly well. Apparently Natalia came up with Naomi and Cameron, it says here. Again, I don't really remember that happening. But it was what it was. Went under the radar like a lot of Divas matches, I guess, in this era of the WWE. Then we had the first of the two most billed matches. This card was built around Brock Lesnar versus CM Punk, and then the main event, Daniel Bryan versus John Cena. I remember this being a really, really good match. The build up to it was really good. Obviously, Heyman turning against Punk at Money in the Bank. Obviously, you don't expect anything less from Punk and Heyman on the mic. And a lot of people were talking, like going into this match, saying that this just seems to be a bit of a mismatch. CM Punk doesn't look credible, and like how they're going to make CM Punk look credible. This was still a time when Lesnar was being highlighted quite well, and he was being pushed quite well, but he wasn't the all-conquering sort of dominant force that he is now. This was before he broke Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania 30. He ended up going over, which I think was the right thing to do, but it was one of those occasions where a loss doesn't do you much harm. I think after that hit and miss title reign, shall we say, of CM Punk in 2011 and 2012, this was a good way to re-establish him as a babyface, and a lot of people were behind him in this. He went in as the underdog, did his best, didn't quite manage to get the victory in the end, which was a nice little storyline, a nice way to kind of build this match up, I guess. Dolph Ziggler and Caitlyn defeated Big E and AJ Lee in, again, quite a forgettable match. It was a little bit of a palate cleanser, I guess, to get people ready for the main event. At least, I guess, Dolph Ziggler was on a slightly higher position than he had been in recent SummerSlams. Caitlyn and AJ are no longer in the company anymore. Big E is in a New Day. None of these guys have particularly progressed that much. Dolph Ziggler is facing Rusev tonight in what I imagine will be somewhere in the middle of the card. It was what it was. Then the main event, which a lot of people were looking forward to. This was really like the start of the Daniel Bryan face turn. He'd had a fantastic storyline with Kane and Team Hell No were one of the most entertaining tag teams in a long while. I remember Daniel Bryan getting a victory against Randy Orton on Raw. I think it was a TLC match or something. So I remember when Bryan made Orton tap out with the kendo stick, and that was a little bit of a sign that they were really serious about Daniel Bryan. They're actually going to give him a bit of a push. John Cena, obviously, the story was that Brad Maddox allowed Cena to choose his opponent for SummerSlam, and he went and chose Daniel Bryan. They had a few good sort of mic segments in the run-up to it. There was a really good Miz TV segment, I remember, when they were just going all at it. I mean, Bryan called John Cena a parody, came out with the Beard is Here t-shirt on. Cena kind of just doing his normal thing. It was really good feud, a really good way to build it up. I remember after CM Punk Brock Lesnar thinking, if these guys kind of stolen the thunder a little bit of Daniel Bryan, how are these two going to deliver a main event that lived up to the match between Lesnar and Punk before? But I think they did really well. It was a different kind of match. CM Punk's match was no disqualification, so they could incorporate different assets, different weapons and different ways of getting the win. Whereas this was just a straight up one-on-one singles match for the title. Really well worked. I think Cena, guys like Bryan and Punk and and Ziggler have got a really good way of getting the most out of John Cena. Bryan went over clean, which took a lot of people by surprise. You could argue that Cena had that kind of arm injury, which was, I suppose, another excuse that you could throw out as to why John Cena got beat clean. But it was a really good way for Daniel Bryan to get the victory. I kind of sensed what was going to happen. I knew Orton was the briefcase holder at the time. The celebration where the confetti was coming down, Triple H was holding up Bryan's hand. You could tell this wasn't the end. They were going somewhere else with this. But I just remember this being a really good time in the company. You had a little bit of a dynamic between Triple H and Stephanie, who were still faces at the time in the build-up to this show, trying to convince Vince McMahon that Daniel Bryan could potentially be a big star for them. They did the whole corporate makeover thing. I remember two really good promo segments between Vince and Daniel Bryan in the run-up to it, where Vince was trying to get Bryan to shave his beard off, and he was saying, you're too short, and you being the champion would have been an embarrassment. And this was just feeding into the crowd's reaction. It's really, really behind Daniel Bryan at this point. And then, I guess for what it was going to lead to eventually at WrestleMania 30, this was a good way to get the crowd even more behind Daniel Bryan. Orton comes out, Triple H gives Daniel Bryan the pedigree, and Orton ends up walking out of SummerSlam as the champion. I've got no problems with it. Bryan gave a good account of himself against John Cena, went over relatively clean, and straight from the start, I remember that this was when the Shield started to be incorporated a bit more. They started to become the bodyguards of Triple H and the Authority. The great sort of segments where Triple H and Stephanie were teasing Bryan, saying you being champion, we don't want to see that. It would be an embarrassment to the company. You're too small. You're too this and that. And Bryan, doing his best to re-establish himself. He had obstacles and barriers to overcome if he wanted to become champion again. And it was a nice storyline. It was a good way to get people interested in the product again. And in many ways, I see SummerSlam 2013 as the catalyst and the springboard for a lot of what was to come later in 2013 and 2014. So I always look back on this show fondly. One of the better SummerSlams we'd had for a while, I think. Arguably, I think I put this ahead of 2009 in terms of PG era SummerSlams. I imagine a lot of people would agree with me on it. If you don't, then feel free to comment in the comment section. But I do remember this being a very good show, and I really didn't mind going back and watching it for the purposes of this review series. Let me know what you thought, and I've only got one of these left to do. Hopefully I'll be able to fit it in before SummerSlam tonight. Check out tomorrow. I'm going to do hopefully a SummerSlam review video and some of my thoughts on what I believe were some of the best SummerSlam matches in history. So make sure you check those out. And subscribe to the channel if you've liked this series and want to hear more of these kind of review videos. And thanks for watching. And if I don't see you before, I really hope that SummerSlam 2015 is a good show, and I hope that you enjoy it. Thanks guys.